Okay, would you like to say anything as an intro to our friends, or just a word?
Yeah, I would just say I think now is an exciting time because the Enneagram is getting more accepted all around the world by more people. More and more people are recognizing really clearly what an amazing tool it is for improving relationships, for use in psychotherapy, in businesses with teams, and to improve working relationships and couples therapy. All of these things are places where the Enneagram can be a real game changer, something that completely changes what happens. I know in my own career as a psychotherapist, I would say maybe 15 years ago, 10 years ago, I would try to turn my psychotherapist friends onto it. And a lot of people just didn't get it or they didn't get interested. And I was always shocked because to me, the Enneagram is like a secret weapon. And I always think like if people only knew that this thing exists that could revolutionize your self-understanding and your understanding of other people. I had experiences when I was working as a couples therapist that I would work and work and work with people for a while, and sometimes it was hard to get anywhere. And then I would introduce the Enneagram, and all of a sudden, like in a month or two, things would get resolved and everything would improve. Sometimes it meant that they broke up, but that was what needed to happen. Sometimes it was when sometimes it's that their relationship improved and they reached their goals. So I think that can be really huge, and it's not as much as a tough sell anymore. I also think in faith-based religious communities, it's catching on. I hear of a lot of people who say, and people who come to our professional workshops that say, I started talking about the Enneagram at my church, and now everyone wants me to do a workshop. Everyone wants me to give a talk, but I don't really know how to do it. We hear, I think the Enneagram is by far the absolute best tool if you're a coach of any kind. If you're a
Yeah.
life coach, an executive coach, it can be something that is gets right to the heart of what someone needs to do to meet whatever challenges and goals they have, and create a lot more understanding, especially in a short amount of time. Because again, the Enneagram goes right to the heart of the matter, and it also highlights blind spots and shadows that people often don't see.
Right, same here, B. When I couldn't believe, like, when you and I were on the board of directors of the IEA, and then eventually you became the president, the global president, and right next I was the president. I think that you and I were like, we couldn't believe that other people would not see that this thing was going to be as big as it is today, because
Right.
people were so afraid of taking the Enneagram anywhere. But anyway, it's a new moment, and let's go on. So I want to say, B, that on top of our experience, I want to be very clear and self-disclose here. I think you and I see many different Enneagram practitioners doing some kinds of work that we don't agree with, and also other stuff that we understand that could be done in more effective ways. I think that's fair to say, right? So maybe indirectly, when we do our talk here, which we hope will be informal and nice, we will appear critical of other approaches. But I want to say that it's never personal, because it's about time that we confront ideas for the sake of the Enneagram system. And at the same time, yeah, we not always agree with how the Enneagram is taken to the workplace, right? And also, I think I think that when you and I do our two professional workshops, um, which are the solutions and the skills workshop, the providing effective Enneagram solutions, and the developing powerful Enneagram skills professional workshops, we see how people get surprised with some things we explain about type, about subtype, and about what happens with people in different situations and how to best help them.
Right.
So sometimes having the Enneagram knowledge is not enough. And sometimes even the Enneagram knowledge people have is not the most updated one. And this is why we created not only these two courses, but also our whole certification process. Do you agree?
Yeah, the Enneagram has so much to it, so many different aspects to it, centers of intelligence, type, of course, subtypes, aeroline movements, using wings for development, and much more. And even understanding that people look different in their type at different levels of awareness. All of these aspects are really important to understand at a deep level if you want to use the Enneagram as a practitioner.
Right. Now, B, I thought that you and I could, instead of being in a formal teaching mode here, you and I could do a little bit what we do in our Enneagram 2.0 podcast. Have a fun, nice, informal conversation, you and I, and exchange ideas and not necessarily agree with each other,
Let's
but
do it. Let's do it.
great. So, I want to ask you first one thing. Um, how much do you see people mistyped? Because I see a lot depending on where I go.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's mistyping is really common, which it makes sense. I think it can be hard to identify your correct Enneagram type for many reasons. One is different types look alike. They engage in the same behaviors, usually for different reasons. And of course, the deeper motivation is what's most important. But also, again, the Enneagram highlights blind spots. And so sometimes you can't really sign up for a description of a particular type if it's yours, if you don't know that you're doing some of the things that are characteristic of that type.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. But I think also that many times mistyping happens for more unfortunate problems, like when people don't know the more updated version of the subtypes.
Sure, exactly. Yeah, yeah. I think the what I call the modern Naranjo subtypes, the subtypes we learned in 2004 from Claudio Naranjo, seminal Enneagram author, I think those like really updated and revolutionized my understanding of the subtle nuances between the three versions of each of the nine types, which to me is invaluable. And we also hear from students changes everything in terms of how deeply they understand the distinct characteristics of each of the 27 types, not just the nine types.
Totally. And then there are other things like the levels of awareness that make some people be mistyped, and even other factors that we've been learning ourselves as time goes by.
Mhm.
Now, B, I sent you a WhatsApp message there. Make sure you see it.
I
And
can't. I'm since I'm doing this on my phone. I probably won't be able to do it. In fact,
no
my phone.
worries.
I hadn't planned to use this for my phone, so this will be informal because now I
Yeah.
have to plug it in, which means I have to
Okay.
adjust
No
the
worries.
angle. Yeah.
No worries. What I thought, and we discussed this beforehand, is that because we want this to be informal, maybe we could do the thing that we do by the end of our podcasts, which
Sure.
is top five list.
Let's do it.
Like talking about top five things that are either mistakes or opportunities that we see when taking the Enneagram to work.
Great.
And the WhatsApp I had sent you is that because when we do the top fives, we make sure we don't see each other's, right?
Right.
And then we confront and we talk, and that's the fun part of it. And you are a more diligent person than I am. And then we find out that I did one list, mixing up the opportunities and the mistakes, and you did two lists. Yours is more complete. So maybe what I'm going to suggest here is that when I say my fifth, you say your two number fives on both lists, both opportunities and threats, so that we
Well,
go
I
five,
can also
four, three,
tailor
two.
it to what you say. So go ahead
Okay,
and you
go
start.
ahead. Okay, good. So this is the deal. We are going to talk about what we see in opportunities and mistakes
Mhm.
that happen, and some of the mistakes have been ours, right? And we are going to go through our lists and compare. So should I start?
Yeah.
Okay, so my top five thing. that
And
is,
say what the thing is really clearly so I can
yeah,
match
yeah,
up with
yeah.
you.
So I think that in the past, when we took the Enneagram to the workplace, it was very much necessary to do applications with the Enneagram
Mhm.
in whatever area of society that place was in. So in business, for instance, we would necessarily do like communication applications or teamwork or conflicts or leadership and many other possibilities. Or when going to spiritual direction, to use it very much just in some spiritual teachings. Or when taking it to a group work, just say that this is because we want to have a high performing team. So it we would need to use the Enneagram just in very practical ways. And at times that was brilliant, but at the same time, we didn't do very well when keeping the depth of the Enneagram because of this, because the time when we would do more pure Enneagram work was a bit more limited. But this was another time, not today. And because of millennials, because of this boom that the Enneagram is going through, not only in the US, but all over the world,
Mhm.
I think that it's not true that we should do only applications when we take the Enneagram to our practices. And that means that it's time for more depth. And people are interested in the Enneagram itself, sometimes even as an upgrade to other typologies and systems that they have been using for longer.
Mhm.
So this is my number five. What is your opinion about this?
So let me just get this straight. So what you're saying is the mistake is that sometimes we think we need to embed the Enneagram, like when we use it in business, in some sort of application, like it's about communication or it's about giving and receiving feedback or it's
Yeah,
about having conflict. Whereas you're saying you don't necessarily need to always apply it that way.
that's it. Yeah,
Hmm.
what I mean by that, I guess, is that there are people who still use the Enneagram just as a tool, and I don't think it's just a tool. I think that it's sometimes the thing that people want. It's more like the goal itself. People want things like that right now.
And when you say they want things like that, like if you don't use it as an application, how are you using it? Because I think people will be interested to say, like, okay, what do you mean use it in depth in a business that we're in a way that's it's not tied to an application? What does that look like?
So, for instance, right now I'm doing work for Unilever, a very big multinational company, and they called me to do that work. Not very interested in applications and communication, teamwork, or so forth. What they want me to do is to do a more in depth approach with individuals first and then with
Mm.
teams. And
Ah.
what they want is the Enneagram as
Mhm.
their objective because they are in love for the Enneagram. And that is
Mhm.
happening more and more and more. I'm not saying
Mhm.
it's always, it's in all companies, but
Mhm.
I just suggest that our friends here keep an eye open to the fact that context has changed and
Mhm.
people don't want more of the same of what they used to do. They want something more in depth.
Right, right. And it sounds like the opportunity, which is sounds fantastic and matches up with my experience, is when you can work with a team, but do like in-depth interviews with every member of the team beforehand. You
Mhm.
have them take our CPS test, which gives that, helps them find their type quickly. And then
Mhm.
they get the information, the report, and then you do an interview, at least one with them where you don't just talk about their type, you talk about their life and their challenges,
Yes.
and you get to know them. And you get to know them so that you can do a little bit of self development coaching. And then when the team comes together, they've all already done this sort of deeper self work on themselves individually, and they
Yeah.
bring that to the team interaction so that the teamwork is much more rich because
Yeah.
they've each kind of gone deeper in themselves. Is that
Right. Yeah, exactly. And if we don't refrain ourselves from going deeper, in one session like that, when we have an assessment tool like the CPS Compass,
right?
then we can get to a point where we will challenge people and they will feel like, wow, this is something really new for me. And they keep thinking and thinking and so forth. But what is your number five?
My number five is people who underestimate how important it is to understand what it means to have a certain center of intelligence. So, for
Mm,
instance, I think I tell you, like, before I started teaching these professional workshops with you, like, I don't think I worked very well with people who are head types or body types as a
mm,
psychotherapist. I didn't realize that, like, people who are body types experience the world in a whole different way than I do as a heart type.
mhm,
And so I think both when I'm working with teams and when I'm working with individuals, like if the client is not a heart type, and I looked back over my psychotherapy career and I realized the vast majority of my clients that stuck over time were heart types. And I
uh-huh,
think it was because I was making a big mistake of not recognizing. It's almost like we speak different languages because we experience the world differently in different modes, right?
mhm.
Head types. And of course, I've learned that's a lot in my relationship with you, in all the ways we misunderstand each other and piss each other off.
It's
And
reciprocal.
sometimes you'll say to me like, hello, I'm a five, and I'm like, oh wow, you know, and I'm applying my expectation of the way I experience the world and relationships to you. And so I think it's affected me in so many different ways. Like
Yeah.
when I work with people that are head types or body types, and it's not my normal emotional mode. I have to sort of adjust the language I'm using, and we teach this in our skills class, and it's one of the things that I like the most, that I always learn from. And then when you work in an organization, for instance, in a team, or if you're in any kind of group, recognizing that people of different centers have different kind of strengths, that things that they're really good at, and then sort of helping the team understand the makeup of the types in terms of the centers, they get a lot of mileage out
Oh,
of
yeah.
just that, you know.
Wow.
So that's my five.
I think that basically what you found out is how weird head types like me are,
Well,
right?
you said it, I didn't.
Okay, so yeah, like when you had an approach to me, like trying to validate my feelings in what I was talking, and that, and to me that wasn't important, and for hard types, it's super important, and I didn't do that with you,
Right,
right? And I
right.
I I lost you so many times. So when working with that, that's super important. So my number four, I see, unfortunately, Enneagram practitioners having implicit biases towards some types. And I think that this comes both because of their own projections
Mhm,
and because they don't really know at times how that type truly work,
mhm.
how those types work.
Right.
And sometimes they don't have that issue, but they allow people in the client organization or the individual client to produce those implicit biases,
Mhm,
because not always the practitioner really makes sure to teach people that the Enneagram types are equally brilliant and equally problematic,
right.
and that it's totally pointless to judge.
Right. And that also, I think, has to do with ethics,
Mm,
like having a really strong ethical way that you use the Enneagram, where you don't allow anyone to say something negative about a type that is really just based on their own, personal bias,
yeah.
that doesn't go unchallenged, right? So if I'm working in a couple or a team and someone says something like, "Oh, those sixes are like this," I'll stop and say, "Wait a minute now. all the types have, things that they're
Right.
naturally good at, and things that they're challenged by. But so I think it's like that creates a lot of safety, and it creates I think a sense that of comfort with the Enneagram, because isn't something that's going to make me feel bad about myself, or
Uh-huh.
a weapon that's going to be used against me.
Totally. What is your number four?
My number four is, I think that practitioners, when they start using the Enneagram, and this can be in any form, in any place, they don't know how to deal with skeptics. They don't know
Mm,
how to deal with people who challenge them. For instance, when they say, hey, isn't the Enneagram just pigeonholing people? I don't want to be put in a box, so I don't want to use the Enneagram. And I think a good Enneagram practitioner is really ready for skepticism. And I usually invite skepticism. I invite questions, and I think that if I don't get thrown off by that, if
yes.
I have a sense of comfort with saying, and of course, the thing that we always say when someone says, hey, the Enneagram's putting me in the box, that it works every time. This is
Yeah.
what we say, I say, is the Enneagram doesn't put you in a box. You're already in a box. You just don't know it. The
Yeah.
Enneagram helps you see the box you're in and helps you get out of it, that you
Yeah.
put yourself in. Right. And so I think when you say it that way, they're like, wow.
Yeah.
Because it's also has the benefit of being true, right? That the Enneagram doesn't put people in boxes. People are already in their own self-limiting patterns that they don't realize they're in. And the Enneagram, by shining a light on those patterns and helping clarify what they are, helps people get out of it. So I think it's really natural when you're introducing the Enneagram as a practitioner in different settings that people will be skeptical, or they'll have questions. I know in a lot of religious circles that there are people who are saying, oh, the Enneagram is the work of the devil, or the Enneagram isn't good for Christians. And nothing could be further than the truth, right? It comes from the truest, deepest, most authentic and high quality source of all the world's religions. And so I think that's sort of when the ego gets involved, and egos want to defend themselves from risk and pain and fearfulness. And so skepticism will be expressed, and I just think we need to be ready to meet that skepticism with openness and invitation, but also knowing how to respond in a way where we're not getting triggered ourselves, like, oh no, someone's challenging me. Well, no, people have good questions about this, and they need to be asked and answered.
Right. Sometimes I think that happens because we are not enough self-confident when taking the Enneagram. We think we are doing something too new or so forth. But I really like your point. And what I say sometimes is, don't believe me. This is something
Mm.
actually that Gurdjieff used to say to his students. Don't believe me. Try it out. Test it.
Yes,
Experience it.
yes.
And yeah,
And
and I think,
I've been doing research into the historic origins of the Enneagram and ancient spiritual teachings, and I believe, it comes from a strain of spiritual tradition that's very ancient. And one of the aspects of that tradition is that it's not based on belief, it's based on direct experience. So what you say, don't believe me, goes along really well with, I think, the DNA of the spiritual DNA of the Enneagram system. It's not about believing any one person who has an ego.
oh
It's
yeah.
about direct experience of something deeper and truer and higher, ultimately.
Right, I totally agree. And the study you've been doing is absolutely brilliant. And this is why we are going to do a 1 day Saturday workshop about those Enneagram roots on March the 18th online.
Nice plug. Nice plug. Nice,
Uh,
nice, nice, nice the way you work
woohoo!
that in.
I'm trying. Not very natural, but
So
anyway,
what's your number three?
my number three. And by the way, people can ask questions here in the chat. We'll have a little bit of time just by the end to answer a few questions. And if we don't get to your question, then we will send an answer to you if we have your data. So, my third B, sometimes I see that people stay just in the first level of using the Enneagram professionally, which is sharing Enneagram information. and they practitioners don't really connect the Enneagram system with all its wisdom to what is really happening with the client. And we miss an opportunity when we don't do that. Like, instead of saying type 4, your type is like that, saying, remember when you told me this? This comes from this part of type 4, and you need to do this, this, and that.
Mhm.
And connect and say, and I think this is your main issue here. And I suggest that you observe this and that you do that. Then the Enneagram gets amazing. I think that we miss a lot of opportunities when we just spread the word. Spreading the word is very nice, but we can go beyond it.
Yeah. 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 My number three is the mistake that is also an opportunity. The mistake some people make of trying to be an Enneagram practitioner without doing their own inner work on themselves. This probably should be number one, but I have it at number three.
Mm,
I think it's actually one of the perks of working with the
yes.
Enneagram that you must do your own inner work as a practitioner. And usually the good thing is that when people get interested in the Enneagram, it's usually firstly for themselves. They find their
Mhm.
type and they think that's really amazing. So, but I think that the thing about the Enneagram is there's always more work to do. Like it's a, you could be working on your type stuff for a lifetime and not do it all. And so I think when people stop realizing that there's more to do or that there's something they haven't yet done, or when they don't see that the Enneagram inner work process as both necessary and to some degree never ending. I mean, it's not to say we don't get satisfaction and we don't get rewards along the way. I think we absolutely do. Especially like for me in my path, I would say I feel so much less anxious in my life now than I did,
Oh, yeah.
15, 20 years ago. Now, part
I'm
of
a
that
little.
was going to therapy for 16 years, but a big part of my therapy was the Enneagram. It helped it go farther faster. But I think it's really a perk of the Enneagram system. If you're working with it as a practitioner, I think it's really important to see yourself as a role model and as someone who can share their own journey and their own story of working with the Enneagram as a way to inspire people. And also it's an act of humility. I think sometimes when I see some Enneagram practitioners, I think there's sometimes a lack of humility, and I always try to ground myself in a humble place, sometimes by sharing embarrassing things about myself that I've worked on or that I've realized, because I think that helps people know that, I'm working on this too. And I don't see myself as a big expert that's way far more advanced than most other people. I'm struggling along the way too. And I think when we're all in it together, you become a guide, but also someone who is modeling humility and a kind of open-mindedness and humanity.
Now I'm liking your top five more than my own. So yeah, but I really like that, and I think it's essential. But there are some other issues behind that, like people not always know what inner work is. They do just a little bit, and they do not the central things in inner work. And sometimes people do either just the psychological or just the spiritual work, while
Right.
the Enneagram is a psycho spiritual tool, and we need to do both. Anyway, do you want to know my second?
Yes.
So it's maybe I should have put this together with the last one, but it's like not knowing where the client's problem is really coming from in the client's personality structure.
Mm.
So let me try to explain this in a simple way. We have the passion, the emotional vice of type. We have the fixation, which is, let's say, a limiting belief of that type. And by the way, there is one passion and one fixation only for each type. Then we have subtypes, and we need to find out the person's subtype. Then we have the instincts, both the dominant, the repressed, and the instinctual sequence, then the defense mechanism. And then there are other things along the path, and the higher spirit, the higher centers of intelligence. But the thing is, when the client presents a certain challenge, when there is a particular problem that should be the focus, we need to be able, as Enneagram practitioners, to know from what part of the personality structure that thing is coming from. So, for instance, if it's coming from the fixation, we need to use more mental approaches to help the client overcome that. Or if it's coming from the passion, we need to use more emotional approaches. Or if it's a subtype thing, we also need to use more body based instinctual stuff. And there are different methods to work on different things. But sometimes Enneagram practitioners not even know where in the personality structure the problem is coming from, because people don't know the difference between fixation, passion, subtype, instinct. One very quick example: when fours have this thought that something's missing, that comes from the fixation. It's a thought and not an emotion or a sensation. And it needs to be dealt with as such. So we
Mhm.
need mental approaches to help a four. But when the four compares, that is coming from the passion of four envy. And we need to do emotional approaches to help the person with. So not knowing this kind of thing is a concern for me. And this is how I tell the difference between a really seasoned Enneagram practitioner, more senior, and someone who's starting a little bit more like in the sharing stages of what the Enneagram is.
Right, right. And I think we call what you're describing assessment as
Mm,
opposed to just typing. Finding
right.
someone's type is the first step, but then assessing what's going on with the person and how to apply the Enneagram specifically to tailor an approach that targets the core of their issue. And that's, of course, part of what we teach in the solutions workshop, like
Mhm.
assessing what the challenge is and providing the right
Right.
solution, drawing on the right aspect of the Enneagram system, which is
Right.
complex.
Yeah, the solutions workshop has two sides to it. There is all the assessment factors, 30 plus, that we have created, and an assessment flow chart. And we teach people how to assess what's really happening and how to solve the issue. But also there is the typing training, right? How to do typing effectively and elegantly, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, these are two things we teach. While on the skills, we say this is what each type is. Forget about those misconcepts, and what this is what the subtypes are. And if you want
Do's
to
and don'ts
see
on
do's
how
and
to
don'ts,
work with the types and the people of
the-
the centers. Yeah.
yeah, the centers and the types and subtypes. So what works and what doesn't, right?
Yeah.
Now, what is your second?
My number two is the mistake I think some people make in not knowing the Enneagram well enough in all its aspects to feel a deep sense of confidence in working with it. And I don't think you need to know everything. I don't think you need to study for 10 years before you're a practitioner. But I do think you need to have a learning mindset that there's always more to learn. I mean, the Enneagram, it's like we're still unveiling all its mysteries, so doing deep work, but also getting to the point where you know it well enough, you know what it is, you know what it does, and you can feel an inner sense of confidence so that people's questions don't shake you. You know, I know a lot of
Mhm.
times when I'm um, presenting it to say, especially in like a business setting, someone will say, well, is this scientifically validated? And I went to school. My one of my graduate degrees is in social science. It's in basically a combination of sociology and political science. And one of the things I learned is we can't really apply the standards of the hard sciences to the soft sciences like psychology. I mean, human interactions are hard to quantify. But the thing is, at this point, I don't really get thrown by that question, and it's understandable, especially in countries like the United States and the UK, where people are a little more wary of things and want to have scientific, proof. So that's a tricky question to handle.
Yeah.
And on the one hand, there are a few studies and that you can point people to, which is good. But nothing that's going to sort of satisfy the proof. But what I like to say instead is that it's the Enneagram is self-verifying. Like put the power back in your hands and take it away from a scientist somewhere, and recognize that you can verify for yourself whether what you observe in yourself matches this. And I've had people on teams kind of uh, defend the Enneagram because they've been working with it already and finding it so valuable. And they're kind of saying, I don't need a
Yeah,
scientist to tell me this
exactly.
works. I can see it for myself.
Yeah, I love your point again. And I think that sometimes we try to talk too much with people who are not easy to convince and don't really want much of that. And while there are so many, but so many who are eager to go for it and test it out and just experience it. So sometimes there is a need to ask yourself, am I really teaching to the right people? Do I have the right target, as the public that I'm trying to reach out to? But anyway, yeah, I love your point. So my number one is go for it, because it's time. It's a great time for the Enneagram. The growth that we see has never happened before for the Enneagram. Like we start getting professionals in our professional workshops that say, I cannot afford not to do this training, because people have been writing me emails asking if I know the Enneagram, because otherwise they won't come to me as a professional.
Right.
So it's a totally new time. And don't ever think that the resistance from people that once existed is still the same. And especially if you start a dialogue with young people. I have a deep belief, B, that the Enneagram is really for the youth right now, that the youth will, really embody it and want to use it in a larger extent, and really doing transformational work and not losing time with things like oh, let me know all the validation and everything. So they just go for something because they find out how brilliant that is. And by the way, before they come to you, they have done tons of research, right, on the internet, and they get interested.
Right.
So go for it and never ever be apologetic when taking the Enneagram to your practice. Some people are as if, oh, you don't know the Enneagram. Yeah, it's good, but almost trying to ask forgiveness for talking about that. And I think that enhances people's anxiety.
I
Uh,
think that relates to my number two, which is have a sense of
yeah.
confidence about it. And here's something that I think will help people have a sense of confidence is
Mhm.
be ready to say the Enneagram's not for everybody. Like if the person is really resistant, or maybe they're not ready for something like the Enneagram, maybe it's not the right thing for them. And I think when I'm ready to say, hey, this is voluntary. You don't need to do it if it doesn't work for you or if you don't like it. And I think if people can say no, it leaves more room to say yes. And I think it also helps them feel not forced into it.
Yes, totally. So very curious about your number one.
Well, I think what we're saying already relates to my number one. And my number one is the number one mistake I see people making, that is also an opportunity, if you do it right, is not creating enough psychological safety for people around the Enneagram. Now, you don't have to be a psychotherapist to know how to create psychological safety, which simply means the Enneagram is a deep and powerful tool. It reveals so much about people when they find their type. And a lot of times, I mean, one of the things that I think is so exciting for me is that, 10 years ago, a lot of leaders and organizations wouldn't want to use the Enneagram because it was too scary,
Yeah.
because it makes people feel too vulnerable, and they didn't want that kind of vulnerability in the work setting. But now a lot of leaders are recognizing, hey, wait a minute, like that vulnerability is actually a good thing. And when I trained in group facilitation at Stanford Business School, the leadership experts used to say there all the time that one of the biggest qualities of a good leader is the ability to selectively self-disclose vulnerability.
I love that.
And when people can be vulnerable with each other, they find ways to connect. Like I see that in couples counseling, when we sort of drill down into what's really going on at a deeper level for each individual in that couple, they find ways to come together much more easily. And when people see
Mhm.
each other's types and they can share based on that, and get to a deeper vulnerable space with each other, amazing things can happen. That's when the magic happens. But of course, it's scary to be vulnerable. So I think we need to be good practitioners when we use the Enneagram. And the number one way to create psychological safety, I think, is to have practices in place that allow people themselves to self-disclose when they're ready in the ways they want to. So, for instance, when I work with the Enneagram on a team, I try not to be the person. I never feel right like disclosing someone's type to some. Like the leader will say, "Oh, can I have a list of people's types?" And I'm like, "Well, why don't we come together as a team and have each person, talk about their own type?" And when people can do that voluntarily, when the power is in their hands to disclose that or not, that right there is really important. And then, of course, the other way is using the Enneagram ethically, like
Mhm.
having a lot of ethics around not focusing on negative biases, like you said earlier, not using negative language to talk about the types, always talking about how all the types are equal. It's a horizontal plane versus the vertical. The horizontal is there's 9 types that are all basically equal, and then the vertical is that this is a model that's all about growth. And then
Yeah.
I think describing the growth process in a way that people can understand, but that also isn't overly scary or mysterious. That it's a lot about self-awareness and increasing emotional intelligence, and that's about learning more about your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and empathizing more with the perspectives of others that are different than you. And so the language we use, the methods we have in bringing the Enneagram in and allowing people to take charge of their own development and make choices freely, to self-disclose and open up and share more, I think it creates a really strong basis. And I think a good practitioner just knows how to do that and use the Enneagram ethically, and not let people use it as an excuse or a weapon, but really have it be something that people feel can start to feel a sense of safety using.
Mhm. Great. Yeah. So we have a little less than 10 minutes to answer a few
I
questions.
think we could also take a few extra minutes because we got late starting.
Right, yeah.
Yeah,
But
my
before we
fault.
go to the questions, I want to just say that if you are interested on the professional workshops we do at CP, we have the skills workshop online from March 20 to 24, and the solutions workshop from May 8 to 12. And all you need to do is to go to our website, cpenneagram.com, and dash calendar. If I'm not right, Amanda will let me know here. So CP Enneagram, CP as in chestnut pies, Enneagram Academy. No, cpenneagram.com dash calendar. And then you see all the information you need about these 2 courses. And we believe that if you're interested in this kind of thing we talked about here, that's how to get started, to go to apply, to register for one of those courses. Now, let me ask you a few questions that I'm getting here, Big.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay.
So there's one person saying, I'm having an unusual issue when finding my true type. I'm certain about my instinctual variant, but not my base type, making it hard to find my subtype. Do you have one advice for this person on their next step?
So is the question that they think they know their dominant instinct? I get confused with the
Yeah.
language instinctual variant because we use subtype synonymously with that. So are
Right.
they saying they know their dominant instinct, but they're not sure of their type?
And subtype. So I think despite some terminology things here, the person is finding it hard to know their type for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So what would be in our limited space here today one suggestion you have for a person like this? And by the way, many people, we see many people in such a situation. So what would be one hint from you?
Well, I mean, aside from, taking our CPS test, which would be one idea, and to see what comes from that, I would say try not to focus too much on the instinct, because I think if you're like sure your self-preservation, for instance, that may cloud your judgment when you look at the types. So I would really look at the types and read some good material that really focuses on the core aspects and see which resonates deeply, and ask people who know you really well in their life, who you trust, to give you as unbiased opinion as they can, what they think as well. And I think sometimes sort of seeing with what resonates in terms of the main patterns, but also being aware of that there are lookalikes. So try to go for more of the core, the emotional passion, the coping strategy, some of those core issues that really define the type.
Yeah, in those two workshops we do, the solutions and skills, we also teach about the subtypes. And sometimes that is what helps a few people. I wonder if this person could be a counter type as we teach, like because these find a little harder to
Right.
land on one type.
Yeah.
And studying the subtypes before studying instincts is wise,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, because
So,
the instincts look different when they combine with different types.
right. Now, I'm going to answer a next question. What are our views on tri-type and tri-fix? Well, these are two different things. There was an original teaching from Oscar Ichazo really back decades ago,
Which
but
was
now
trifix.
tri-fix, and
Tri-type is
then
different.
tri-type is different. And what I want to say, don't want to be controversial here. I'm just going to say that we don't come from that perspective, and we don't teach it that way. We have a few concerns, but we really respect the professionals who bring other kinds of teachings. It's just not our approach. We don't really use that approach. Would you add anything?
Yeah, I would say in our experience, just working with people, we've found that when people talk about tri-types, they get distracted from the main work they need to do with their main type. Like
Yeah.
if you're always saying, well, oh, that belongs to this second type, or this thing I do belongs to this third type, often though all that stuff belongs to your main type, and there's a way that you get off track by kind of focusing on three types instead of the main type. And we also believe that the arrow line movements are really important in helping people develop and come out of this stubborn adherence to the focused attention of the main type. And so it also sort of lessens the value of those arrow line movements and the way those have the effect of bringing you out of your main type in a way that helps you grow. And so we haven't found tri-types to be a, a very useful tool. Than when you're really helping you grow, it seems to stay more at the level of description. But of course, if people find value in that, then they do.
Right. So I have another question here from another participant. I want to ask you. So I'm a health and healing coach and former holistic nurse practitioner, and would love to add the Enneagram coaching to what I offer. Where do I begin? I took the test and I have been doing my inner work. So my question to you be, do you think that this person could be a candidate to do the skills workshop and the solutions workshop? Or is it more for business people?
Well, I think that, I mean, our intention is creating the whole professional certification program that we have and these workshops is to help people learn the Enneagram at a deep level, no matter what their area that they're working in. You know, psychotherapists, we get a lot of psychotherapist coaches. And I think sometimes we're helping people either make a career transition or add the Enneagram as something, like it sounds like this person is saying, to their repertoire of tools they work with. I do think that our workshops are especially tailored to that. So you could sample one of them and see how that works. Now, for people who are brand new, you know, our courses can be a little bit advanced because we work at such a deep level. But what we'll often offer is access to some of our pre-recorded courses, like our masterclass, as an introduction. So you can get that as part of the package to do some study on your own through our masterclass, which kind of gives you an overview of the types and subtypes and things like that, so that you can feel more comfortable coming in and knowing that you're going to be able to make use of what we do in those workshops, which is basically really try to give you everything you need to know, all the tools, especially in terms of understanding the system and how to apply it so that you can start integrating it. That's the whole
Yeah,
goal of the program.
right. And we do get some healthcare practitioners in the program.
We do.
So I'm going to answer another question, but I want to hear from you. What do you think? Do you guys use the conflict coping styles, meaning types 4, 6, and 8 being reactive, types 1, 3, and 5 being logical, and 2, 7, 9 optimistic? I found this very helpful, but I don't see this often. Yeah, so here's the thing. I think there is some valid points to this theory. I think that it mostly works. However, we're trying to make it a bit more sophisticated by integrating the subtypes. And when we see the subtypes, we see that the theory doesn't work 100%, not even close, to be honest. So, for instance, if you get a sexual one, the person isn't really very logical. If you get a
And sometimes instead of logical, it's competent. I've
competent,
heard
yeah,
competence
yeah,
used instead of logic. Yeah.
right. Although this person is talking a bit more about the conflict coping, but the
Yeah, that's
titles
what I'm
are
talking
different.
about. It's
Yeah,
reactive, positive outlook, and
yeah.
competence is the
That's
way I've
how I
heard.
knew it
Slightly
also.
different. Yeah, yeah.
Right. And then, for instance, optimistic. Do you think that self-pres nines are always optimistic? I don't. I think
Yeah.
they are a little less so. Or not all sixes are equally reactive. So, or compliant, as we see in other places. So, no. So we don't agree fully with the theory, and I think it deserves to be refined by the subtypes. But what would you add?
So I will say that I everything you just said about how it varies in terms of center, type, and subtype, not just type. I think applies to the Hornavians, which some people use, which is a different set of triads. These, which I've often heard of as conflict styles or something like that. Well, I do use them with teams, but only in a very general sense. So, for instance, I'll give you a great example. I worked with a team last week, and it was a team of about 12 people, a leadership team, and they were almost all twos, sevens, and nines, right?
Wow.
And those are the positive. So I do use it in a very general
Yes.
sense, where I
Mhm.
introduced those three triads, and I said, okay, so you're all positive outlook people. What does that mean? Because again, you have to say what that means and how they're going to use that insight in order to spend any time on it. And what I said in this case is, so this team is going to have to be careful that they don't avoid conflict, right? That they don't just look on the bright side and not have the necessary discussions, maybe about what's not working or what's not going so well, or and it's true that the team was, you know, needing to kind of surface any disagreement and work through it and that kind of thing. So I use it in a very general sense, but I don't see how it can go much farther than that. But as one aspect of something that I highlight for a team when I'm talking about the mix of types on the team, I do find that one is something that helps them. But again, then you get into trying to explain what reactive is to sixes and fours and eights, and
Yeah.
sometimes again that gets into being a little bit negative in a way that I don't like to put that on people.
Right.
But I do find that when teams have all positive outlook types, that's a nice thing to point out.
Right, right. And yeah, so I think that sometimes that is also a bit complex for people, and it's a better thing to keep it simple. And we really like to use the main triads of the
Right.
centers of intelligence. But there is another question that I'll answer. How can you better tell whether something is coming from the passion or fixation in yourself or in others? Well, it's very simple. You need to understand what the nine fixations and the nine passions are. And I'm afraid people don't understand. So you need the right definitions. You need to know what they talk about. And then it will be super easy for you to identify. I won't go further. There are other things to say, but that's where to start, right? Now, a question for you, B, that I want to hear your opinion. Let me find it again. Has anyone done any research on the variables of disability and the Enneagram? I'm finding it looks different for the disabled. I don't know any research about that I could mention with confidence to you.
I don't really notice. I mean, it sounds like it's an area that needs research. So maybe someone listening to this can do that. Yeah,
The person who
I
asked the
don't know.
question.
I think it's a good question, and it's probably
Yes,
it sounds necessary.
interesting. And one last question before we finish. Is your CPS test able to distinguish levels of awareness? Is there a risk that a higher or lower level of awareness can give rise to mistyping or look alikes? I'll say two things and then please add something. No, our test does not measure, in the report, it does not talk about levels of awareness. And the main reason why is because we think it's inappropriate to tell this to the client. And even for the coach who potentially reads what, and we do have a coaching report, um, you know, people, most coaches don't know exactly how to deal with that information. What we do is to teach a very sophisticated method of levels of awareness in our solutions workshop. We are extremely proud of our levels of awareness model at CP because it's based on the Enneagram and it's really sophisticated. And we teach it in ways that the practitioner can identify the person's level of awareness, both in general and per type, when they talk with the client after the client did the test. And we see that some tests that measure that, in our view, don't measure it right.
Right.
I think that there are potentially different concepts of levels here, and even tests that are wonderful, they unfortunately are not the best in that particular module. But yeah, so what do you think?
I would say that it's really a tall order to both create a test that gets the type accurately and measure level of awareness. So I think, like Uranio said, when tests that have attempted that, I don't think they've succeeded. How we get around that, and yeah, we don't measure level of awareness. I think that would be too difficult. But how we try to get around that so that it doesn't impact the results is we tell people when they're taking the CPS test at several points, including the beginning. And even when I send out a code to a client, I tell them this in an email. I say, when you're answering these questions, take into account your life as a whole,
Mhm.
not the past or the present,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
When you have to say, and we say that over and over again, like I think it's repeated on different pages of the test. Like, remember, answer thinking, taking into account your whole life.
Yeah.
Because it's not just the past, it's not the present. And maybe this person has grown a lot and they're completely different. That's why we have those instructions as part of the test. And we tell practitioners to emphasize that when they're using the test, because that helps people be a little more honest. I know when I was taking it myself, there were things I did not want to admit as a two, like, oh God, well, I don't do that anymore. Well, But if I'm keeping in, if I'm thinking about my whole life, the whole how I've been, then yes, I have to admit to certain
Right.
things.
Yes.
So that's how we try to get around that and get the type and as accurately as possible.
Yeah, and we always suggest that Enneagram practitioners never take a test only, that they also complement it with typing interviews. And the way we teach our typing interview method considers the levels of awareness, and people get a bit more capable of telling what the actual level of awareness of the client is.
Yeah.
So that's how we deal with it mostly, not on the test.
Yeah, it's really good for a practitioner to learn to do a really good systematic interview because that helps the client confirm or disconfirm the results of any test.
Right. And yeah, and the test does get other very interesting things and more with a lot of accuracy, like subtypes. So we are very happy with that. But the test is something very nice. People should check it out. But I think that if people really want to learn how to use the Enneagram professionally, they should consider registering for the solutions and or the skills workshop. We hope that some of you will go to our website and see our calendar of events and potentially be with us in one of those online groups that will happen really real soon.
Yeah.
So anything you would like to say so that we end, B?
I guess we also have some free stuff on our website that you can download descriptions of the types and subtypes information and often you can download those and give those to clients as something that they can take with them after you work with them.
Exactly. And if you want to know a bit more of our work to make your decision to register the workshops, you might want to see our podcast, in case you don't know it, the Enneagram 2.0 podcast. We are trying to do a more in-depth work with the Enneagram, and we don't really do much introductory approaches to the Enneagram. We are more about what we hope is the next level of how to work with the Enneagram. And if this interests you, we'll be extremely happy to see you there pretty soon in one of our programs. So I guess this is it, B.
Yes.
Oh, excellent to have a discussion with you.
Yep.
And yeah, so thank you for participating. We have many people who joined. And if you're watching this video later on YouTube, also know that these courses are ongoing, so you can see our calendar at any time. Thank you, dear.
Thanks everyone. Thanks, Uran.